I'm going to do something unusual in this presentation, especially as it's about communication. I'm not going to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm going to save that until later. But what I will tell you up front is that I like to be interrupted. Okay. If you can't hear me, shout out. If you don't understand something I'm saying, shout out. I don't have face, okay? I'm an ungmo. You cannot make me lose face in front of everybody, right? Particularly, I'm interested in hearing from you if you disagree with something I say, right? Because then I might learn something. Right? It's through honest, direct feedback that we actually all learn from each other, and that's what this whole experience is about. Okay, so I have roughly 1 hour with you today for an enormous topic. Have you, any of you, come up across the thing called the innovation trifecta? You ever seen it? It's like 3 circles, and it says feasibility, desirability, and what's the other one? Value creation or something like that. Right? The idea is that for any innovation to be successful, it has to have these 3 qualities. It has to be technically feasible, otherwise it doesn't work. It's got to be economically viable. It's got to generate value for somebody and capture some value for itself. But most important of all, it's got to be desired by all the people who are involved. So there's this sweet spot in the middle. Now, if you think of those 3 circles, the technical feasibility part of it is the product in your company or the service that you deliver. That's the specialist thing that you do. That's 1/3 of success. 2/3 of success is making something that's economically viable and something that's desired by other people. In other words, 2/3 of your success with the businesses that you're trying to launch will come from marketing and communications. Who in the room is actually familiar with marketing? Let's do them separately. Who's got a sort of marketing background or has done a course in marketing or anything? Can I have a show of hands? 1, 2, 3. Thank you, guys. Who's done any kind of communications? Maybe did a communications course or something like that? Nobody? Okay. Well, we have 2 sessions together. We've got today, and then we have a month's time as well. So what I've done is I've split up this title, Marketing and Communications, and mostly today I'm going to talk about communications. And then next month we'll talk about marketing in more detail, okay? I'm going to talk about communications in general. Now, because I've only got 1 hour with you, I'm going to make these assumptions. I'm not going to read them all off the screen, but rather, as the previous speaker said, just as he was leaving, I view this opportunity to be together, to talk on the strategic level, to talk about the big picture, the helicopter view of what you're trying to achieve. The nuts and bolts, if you want to write a pitch deck, if you want to learn about presentation skills, if you want to put together a communications plan, right, the tactical level stuff, please Google it. Right? There are a million YouTube videos about that stuff, right? If you don't understand it or you can't find what you want, please come back to us and we'll try and help you find the resource. But the tactical how to do it stuff is out there. There is bucket loads of it, right? I cannot in 1 hour convey to you all I've learned in 30 years about marketing communications. It just isn't possible, right? What I can give you is a landscape that will hopefully allow you to find what you need when you need it. So this talk is going to be a kind of a landscape picture, yeah? And then you'll have to drill down yourself for the specifics. And in the mentoring sessions and everything else, if there's something you can find, as I say, you can't find, let us know and we'll help you find it. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to do it in 4 sections, really. I'm going to talk about marketing and communications in the context of the journey that you're on. Is everyone here building a business? Have I understood that correctly? You're all founders, right? Some of you have been in business a while. Some of you are just starting out, different expectations, different experiences. So there's a journey that you're on. And what I'm going to talk about is what communication means this month, what communication means at each step of that journey, and where you can find the resources that are relevant. Right? So let's pitch straight in to look at that journey. And thank you, Yvonne, for doing the slides for me. So let's look at the journey first. Now, I apologize for this being a bit technical and also in rather small type. I'm trying to tread a path in this talk today between sort of cheemology, and if I go down into the weeds, as I say, we're not going to fit it into an hour. So I'm going to try and give you an overview. Entrepreneurship as a sort of topic that we understand in the world is quite new. Up until 20, 30 years ago, entrepreneurs were basically viewed as losers. They were people who couldn't get proper jobs. Sounds amazing, doesn't it, nowadays, when there's so much interest in entrepreneurship. But if you went to business school 30 years ago, there would be nothing about entrepreneurship. When I started my entrepreneurial career, I went back to my university. I did a physics degree originally, and I went up to the library and I looked in the library on the business floor for information about entrepreneurship. And there was one shelf of one cabinet that had some books on small business, like how to talk to your accountant. And that was it, right? Seems amazing, doesn't it? But universities and business schools did not talk about entrepreneurship. Incredible. If you've ever been told, why haven't you got a proper job, right? That's someone with a mindset that doesn't understand how valuable entrepreneurship is. So we're still at the stage of trying to understand what is entrepreneurship, and that's a whole discussion we can't get into today. But there is, I think, a fairly broad agreement now about what happens when you build a startup. So at the beginning, every startup starts off being a conversation. Perhaps we could move on to the next slide, Yvonne. And it starts over coffee, something like that. And it's often very hard to say, when does a startup begin? It's a bit like, when does a relationship begin? You know, is it first kiss? Is it first date? First time you sleep together? When you go and visit his or her parents? When did the relationship actually start? You can say that a couple got together and that they are in a relationship, but the actual moment at which it started is quite hard to define, isn't it? Same with a startup. They kind of emerge from conversations. What you can say about successful startups, at least the way we define them here, is that at the end of this journey of being a startup, they acquire this thing called legitimacy. And something's gone wrong with my arrow there. The arrow is supposed to point from the word legitimate to the top right-hand corner. Right? So at the end of the journey, when you stop being a startup, there will be three things happening. Your business will be accepted by the ecosystem as being valid, having a proper structure, deserving its place in that ecosystem. There will be an organization. There will be something that you can hand on. I think one of the hardest things to imagine as a founder is leaving the business, but imagine that you'd built a bus. If you can't step out of the driving seat and someone else can sit into the driving seat, you can't sell the bus, right? Because you'd have to sell yourself with the bus. So the key to building a business that ultimately can scale up, and a business that other people can buy into, and can be taken further than your own 24 hours in the day, is to create a bus where other people can sit in the driving seat. So the weird thing about setting up a startup successfully is that ultimately you don't have to leave it. There are plenty of examples of founders who stick with their businesses right till the bitter end. And there are some people like Zuckerberg who built them, up to huge size. Actually, those are the rarity. The majority of founders are specialists in doing this journey, and they sell out to somebody else when they get to this stage. This is the stage when the suits come in. This is when the MBAs come in, right? This is when everything that's been taught at business school over the last 100 years works. It's not that everything at business school was taught before was wrong. It's just that it only applies after this point. At that point, after this, you're a scale-up, not a startup. Okay? So legitimacy is kind of what you're aiming for. So how do you get to be seen as legitimate in your ecosystem? You do marketing. And marketing is a strategy. It's not a series of activities, right? Those are the tactical things that you do. Marketing is a strategy to get yourself to be seen as legitimate and to have an organizational structure and everything else, right? That's what it's about. So we're going to talk about words like product market fit next time, because there isn't time to address it today. But that's one of the signs that you've achieved legitimacy. Okay, next slide, please, Yvonne. So if we imagine that there are these three kind of broad phases. Now, I should say, be very careful about the idea that every startup follows the same path, because they don't. You're all different in this room. Every entrepreneur, I've worked with something like 1,500, 2,000 entrepreneurs over the last 20 years. I've invested in something like 100 businesses. Every founder I've met is different. Every startup has its own journey. But I think broadly you can say that there are three sets of things, and they don't necessarily follow in this order. They sometimes go backwards and forwards, right? But every startup starts off as a conversation between a bunch of founders and people we would call stakeholders. And by that, I mean people who are going to be directly interacting with your business, like customers, investors, distribution partners, landlords, those kinds of people, right? Now, those aren't the only people who affect your business. There's also what we call the community of inquiry. That's a bunch of people like regulators. Is anyone here doing anything medical? No, you are. Okay. So, it's got to be safe, right? There are people interested in is anyone else doing anything financial here? Is there any fintech business in the room? Right. Two of the most heavily regulated industry verticals are healthcare and finance. You can't just launch into those and screw up and kill people or take all their money, right? Unfortunately, that's happened too many times in history. So we've now wised up to that. So regulators are one of the group of the community of inquiry. They don't step in until things go wrong, but they are watching, right? There's also people like academic researchers. There's people like everyone in this room from NUS. We're all here to support you. We're not direct stakeholders in your business necessarily, unless we've taken a share. Have we taken shares in these businesses, Yvonne? Or? No, right. So we're not an investor. We're here to facilitate what you're doing, right? We're part of your community of inquiry to help you find out the questions you should be asking and to get the answers to those questions. So everything starts off as a conversation between people who know each other. And one of the reasons we put so much energy at NUS into building community, into building opportunities for you to talk to other people, is that it's through these random conversations that you meet the people that you need. Most of the time, you're not going to be meeting the person you need directly. You're going to be meeting someone who knows the person you need. Right? So one of the things about communication is it's about saying, oh, I know this person, who should I be talking to? And he says, oh, you could talk to my friend. And actually my friend knows somebody else. That's how you get to somebody. It's like how my generation found our life partners. Believe it or not, my wife and I did not have handphones when we met in 1991. I think there were dating sites, but the internet was still pretty basic. The World Wide Web had not been invented, right? I'm that old. But we still managed to find each other, and we did it through friends of friends. And that's how business works. You never, ever do business with an organization. You always do business with people. And that's why communication matters. Okay. So it starts off as a conversation, and out of a bunch of random conversations, you get some kind of germ of an idea, what the academics call new venture cognition. Maybe there's an opportunity here of some kind, right? If you all agree that's a good idea, you go through this thing that looks like a tumble dryer in the middle. That's the confusing, exciting, scary, nightmare roller coaster of doing a startup. And you come out the other end of it with some kind of clear strategy and these three things if you're successful. As you've probably been told and you probably know, 9 out of 10 startups do not make it out the other end. Right? It is extremely tough. Growing a startup is an Olympic sport. You're competing with the world from day one, and most people don't have what it takes, which is not a personal failure. It just turns out to be extremely difficult to do startups, and I'm delighted that you're all giving it a go. So every one of these arrows in this conversation is about communication. So I'm going to talk in phase by phase over the rest of this talk about what communication means at each of those phases, and then you can decide for yourself what stage your startup is at. So next slide, please. So thank you. So right at the very beginning, you need to be listening. Communication at the very start is not about you telling the world about your idea, right? It's not about selling. Because the dirty secret of running a startup is nobody gives a shit about you or your ideas, right? The toughest thing about setting up a startup, it's not that people say no to you, it's that they don't respond to your emails. They just don't care. You'll meet that again and again and again. It's sort of rejection passively. And it's one of the most difficult things to cope with as a first-time founder. So don't worry if you're experiencing that. It's normal, okay? So how do you get around that? Well, the first thing is, if you go and you try and start selling a half-baked idea to people, they're not going to say yes, right? They're not going to write you checks. They're not going to give you opportunities. So don't go through the door talking at them, pitching at them like a desperate salesperson. Go in listening to them, chatting to them about their problems, their needs. Well, how do they see the world, right? That's the interesting thing. Next slide, please, Yvonne. So at the very beginning here, the most important thing you can do when you're running a startup is to try and figure out, how do my stakeholders think? In fact, who are my stakeholders? What keeps them up at night? Next slide, please, Yvonne. You can use something like this if you like. This is called an empathy map in Canvas. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this before, but if you can identify the key people in your world, right, close to you, the stakeholders, and try and figure out who exactly are they. Don't put down broad generalizations like big companies or everybody in Singapore, right? Because that's not a category of people. You need to be able to say mid-20s salespeople in large organizations in Africa, right? In fact, not even in Africa, in whichever country it is in Africa. As more specific you can be about the people you're trying to communicate with, the more meaningfully, thanks Yvonne, you can connect with them. So what are they trying to achieve in their lives? How do they see the world? Where do they get their information? Do they read blogs? Do they listen to MediaCorp? Do they read the Financial Times? Do they listen to their friends? What are those things, right? And what are they saying? Do they have blogs? Do they have podcasts? Do they have YouTube channels, Instagram, whatever? What are they trying to do, right? What power have they got to get things done right now? And as they're trying to get things done, who's influencing them? And then most important of all, these two things, what is really challenging for those people out there in your ecosystem? What pain are they experiencing? And what gain are they trying to achieve? If you can help people overcome the pain they're facing and to achieve the gains they want to achieve, they will love you, they will listen to you, and they will do business with you. And that is the only way that you will make them care about you. I'm talking customers, I'm talking investors, I'm talking partners, everybody, right? Don't talk about you, talk about them. Listen, don't pitch. Next slide, please. And what you need to think about is, I'm trying to get into this environment, this ecosystem, and I'm trying to be one of them. At the moment, nobody cares about me. Nobody believes I'm legitimate. I'm just this startup, right? Nobody cares. If you want to be one of them that cares, that's looked up to, you need to find a place in that ecosystem. You need to earn a place in that ecosystem. And the best way to do that is to think, as John F. Kennedy said, not what my country can do for me, but what can I do for my country? What can I do for my ecosystem? Let me give you an example. Imagine you're launching an incredibly technical product like a new heart valve, okay? You might think to yourself, I'm a very illustrious surgeon, right? I can just go and pitch my heart valve to all my surgeon friends and they'll just buy it. Right? Well, your surgeon friends might listen to you if you're a prestigious surgeon, but your surgeon friends are only part of the decision-making process on who buys that heart valve. There's going to be a bunch of people around that decision, regulators, manufacturers, insurance companies who are financing heart surgery, a bunch of people who all have to be brought on side. Now, it might be that there's a blockage in that ecosystem. There's something they're not talking about. And the wonderful opportunity you have as a startup is to say things that need to be said that nobody else can say. Now, because we are NUS, number 11 or 12, whatever it is in the world, university, right? There's a bunch of things that we can't say as a university, some quite awkward truths sometimes, right? Because we're an institution. We're funded by government. We have a whole lot of complex long-term relationships, right? People care about what NUS says. They don't care about what you say, and that means you can say whatever you like. And if you think there's a conversation that's not happening, you can be the cheeky chappy in the room who says, actually, we're not talking about this. Why aren't we discussing this? This is really awkward. We should fix this. And if you're the person who stands up and says we should be fixing this thing and begins to facilitate a discussion about how you fix it, everyone will gravitate towards you. They'll all be interested in talking to you, yeah? You become an influencer. So look, first of all, to serve your community, to serve your ecosystem. It is extremely difficult for you as a startup to go to the chief executive of Johnson & Johnson. What area of healthcare are you working in? Diagnostics, okay. So what would be a big corporate in your space? Would J&J be in your space, or GlaxoSmithKline, or who would be? GlaxoSmithKline, right. So at the moment, do you work for them or anything like that? No, okay. So if you try and go to the head of GlaxoSmithKline in Singapore, they're not going to see you, right? On the other hand, if you work with a trade association of diagnostic research people, whatever, in Singapore, And on behalf of that trade association, you go to the head of Jack GlaxoSmithKline and you say, I'm really interested in what you think about this issue. Right? Would you share that with our community? They'll answer it. So I used to be a journalist. I started my career in broadcast TV, and I found out very quickly, if you phone most people up and you say, I'd really value your advice, ... About 6 or 7 out of 10 people will pick up the phone. If you say, I'm writing a report or I'm writing a book and I'd really like to make sure your views are represented, right? 9 out of 10 people will give you time. Because it's a different conversation from going in and say, hi, I'm a penniless startup with no customers, and I'd really just like to kind of hang out with you because I need to kind of some point sell you. I mean, do you know what I mean? People are not going to see you, right? So find a reason to meet the people that you need to meet. Don't try bashing your way through the front door, because everybody's trying to get through the front door. Go around the back of the building, look for a loose window, break in there, right? That's how you get into large organizations in particular. Thank you, Yvonne. So when you come to map out your ecosystem, this is the picture that I think many academics now have of how ecosystems work. Stuff actually happens in ecosystems as collaborations between business units inside organizations and startups, or between, a university and a hospital or something like that. That's what they would call a circle of action. You want to be part of one of those. Every circle of action exists in some kind of a community. Let me give you an example. In the Netherlands, there's an extremely successful open innovation project. It's run by a whole community of medical device manufacturers. They make things like beds for hospitals, heart monitors, stuff like that. If they individually go in and try and see the procurement people in the hospital, they won't get anywhere. But if together they go in and they say, together we're doing a project about reimagining the maternity ward. What can a maternity ward look like? We brought together 10 of the top people in the country to imagine a new vision for maternity wards. Then the chief executive will come and be interested, right? And often what happens is that the most interesting innovations happen on the junction between two of these communities. And that's where, as a startup, you can play a really interesting part. So, for example, if you're a medical diagnostics company, then you're part of the diagnostics business, right? But if you're just another diagnostic test, you're just another diagnostic test, right? There's a shed load of those, right? If you can align yourself with some kind of patient group campaigning on behalf of a bunch of people with a disease, or a government agency that's trying to make some social change happen in society, and you can be on the boundary of those two things, then suddenly you have a platform to speak from, right? People are interested in talking to you. So always from the beginning of this, try and think of yourself at the end of the journey. Try to imagine, if I was a legitimate player in this ecosystem, how would I be communicating? Who would I be talking to? What would I be saying? Thank you, Yvonne. So the whole of all of these communities join together in, the ecosystem. Has anyone here ever been to Switch or to InnovFest? Right, it's these big, I'm sure there'll be opportunities for you guys to go to them through NUS. They are sort of festivals of innovation, and they're held at Expo, and there's thousands upon thousands of people talking there. They're from all different sectors. They're all part of actually many ecosystems that all come together. That's the kind of level that government operates. Right? Trade associations, the Singapore Medical Devices Association, the Singapore Association of Hoteliers, the Asian Pacific Croissant Manufacturers Association, right? Those are the kind of communities that you'd have here. Thank you, Yvonne. So make yourself useful to those people. Start leveraging opportunities to get on committees. Many of these organizations are staffed by people my age who've run out of ideas, are quite tired, right? And they often want to be representative. So if you're a female entrepreneur, bash your way in, bang that drum and say, there's no female representation on this committee. I want to be on the committee, right? Push your way in, get those elbows out like an auntie on the MRT, right? Bash your way into the committee, get yourself able to leverage the name of that organization so that you can start having conversations with people on behalf of that organization. And then once people know you and see you associated with a trade association, see you associated with things bigger than your startup, then they'll be interested to say, hey, what is it you actually do? So, well, actually, funny enough, I'm doing a startup, blah, 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 blah. And then, oh, and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. You should meet my friend Mei Lin. Well, yeah, that's the way it happens, right? So once you've got engaged with your ecosystem, the next thing to do is to get your own personal story straight. And this is the point at which I introduce myself. Now, most startups do this. If we can go to the next slide. What is wrong with that, apart from the fact that I had a beard and the pictures are all in black and white? What is wrong with that story? Why don't you're almost there. They don't even want to buy what I'm selling. They want me to deliver a benefit for them, don't they? I want to sell them something, but they want to achieve a benefit. So there's nothing in here that makes me relevant. Now, you might think, if you sat there and you looked at that long enough, you might think, oh, Hugh, he's quite an interesting guy. He's sort of legitimate vaguely, but you have to do a whole load of cognitive processing to figure out whether any of that stuff is relevant to you, right? That is how most startups, if you ever sat down with a PowerPoint presentation in a meeting and someone's told you a load of stuff and you think, at the end of it, like, I wasn't negative about it, I just don't care. It's because someone has told you what they want to do, not why you should care. So let's look at a better way of telling a story. So I'm going to break that down. I'm going to give you a formula now, which you can use in every single meeting for the rest of your life, right? You can use it for wedding speeches. You can use it when you retire. You can even try it with your grandchildren when you get to that stage. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So the first step of the story is, next slide, please. Why? Why should you care about this Ung Mo standing up here at the front of the room? And I've said, I help individuals and teams to build new ventures. So if you're not an individual or a team, or you're not interested in building new ventures, right, Siam, right? This is the way I tai chi away all the people that I don't want to talk to. If you go to Switch or InnovFest, you're going to meet thousands of people. You are anyway as a startup, right? You're going to, over the next year or two, you're going to meet thousands upon thousands of people. Most of them, it's a complete waste of time for you talking to them. And the one thing you're short of is time. I know it feels like you're short of money, but actually time you're short of. Everyone's got some money in the bank, some willingness from friends and family to support you. Once you've burned through that goodwill, burned through that money, you're out of time. You have to go back and get a job with the Garmin or something, right? Don't work for IRAS, pushing bits of paper around. So this is a filter. By saying why at the beginning, the people who are individuals and teams and are trying to build new ventures know that it's worth talking to you. Next step, how do I do what I do? Okay, oh, he's got 30 years of experience. Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. So 2 reasons to say no have now been taken away. Am I relevant to you? And do I seem legitimate? If you think that working 30 years doing this stuff makes me legitimate to you, then the conversation's worth having. If you don't think it's worth listening to, that's fine. I've got plenty of other things to do with my day. Lastly, the very last thing I tell you is what I do, right? There are millions of people who do this, right? Even Singapore, there are thousands of people who call themselves mentors. There are thousands of people who call themselves trainers. That's not why you buy from me. It's not why why signs my checks at the back every month. Right? He signs my checks because of this. Right? So you need to develop a story for your startup that does the same thing. And it's terribly difficult to do. And unfortunately, there isn't time to do it today, but hopefully in working together over the following months, there'll be an opportunity to go through this. If you try and describe your startup, I guarantee the first thing will come out of your mouth say, oh, we like do this mobile app, and it's for the travel industry. Okay. Meh. Right. You need to tell me why you do what you do. If you only remember one thing from today, this is the formula. Okay. So if you're at the end of this very first phase, This is a kind of a checklist. I won't run through it all, but by the end of this first stage of starting a business, this is the kind of thing you should have straight. Most people don't do this, right? There is an old-fashioned school of language that comes from business schools. You'll hear phrases like go-to-market strategy, right? And it comes from being a farmer. Like, I've got a bunch of cabbages. I'm going to take them to the market and someone's going to buy my cabbages, right? Now that works for cabbages because we know that cabbages are something that people want to eat, and we can roughly identify who the people are that are going to buy them, like people who are cooking, right? So if you go to where the people who are cooking are, you might be able to sell some cabbages. But if you're launching a new diagnostic test and you put millions of dollars into developing your fabulous diagnostic test, and then you take it to market, ta-da! And it's like tumbleweed. Nobody gives a shit. They don't believe that you're legitimate. Even if your test is fantastic, you're just another one of many tests, right? So you have to do all of that relationship stuff building before you start. So I've spent a lot of time on this first section because it is the thing, in my experience of working with something like 1,500 startups, this is why most startups fail. They launch something that nobody cares about. So please don't miss this step, especially if you're a technologist. The fallacy of most engineers and scientists is, if I have something brilliant enough, people will find me, build it, and they will come. Have you seen that movie, Field of Dreams? It's a very old film now. Right? It's the worst piece of advice you can ever be told as an entrepreneur. Build it and they will come. They won't. They don't care. Okay? So if you're into the stage and you know what people want, the next stage then is, how do you organize yourself? This is a whole long conversation. What I will say about it is that there are a number of things that happen during this. This is an enormous conversation. Let me just give a very brief summary. I mentioned the fact that most of the time people don't care. Occasionally, you get opportunities to, once you know what the market wants, once you've got some story that's worth telling, you need to be able to pitch it very quickly. Has anyone heard this phrase, an elevator pitch? Do you know that phrase? Your company needs an elevator pitch. And if we can go back a couple of slides, Yvonne, to the back again, back again, back again. This is your elevator pitch, right? It lasts for 1.5 to 2 sentences. That is all. And it's called an elevator pitch because you need to be able to give it in an elevator. When you find yourself in an elevator with Bill Gates or whoever, and you've got 15 seconds, this is what you need to say. When you're at a trade show, this is what you need to say. When your friends say, oh, you should meet my friend Hugh, because the thing you want them to say is this, right? So we call it an elevator pitch. Now, initially, your elevator pitch is not going to be right. People are going to go, huh, okay, and they'll be very polite, especially if they're face-to-face with you. The problem is, if they don't feel confident about your elevator pitch, it's like a name card. Imagine you were given a kind of really mangled, sort of confusing name card where you could only read half the letters on it. Would you take that back to your office and show it to your boss? You wouldn't, right? You need to give them the verbal equivalent of a name card. You need to give them a little story McNugget, which they can repeat reasonably accurately back to their colleagues. And the reason you have to do that is because building an audience for your startup is like projecting an image onto the sky. This is I won't go through all the text here, but it's kind of interesting. The constellations in the sky are, of course, an entirely human manufactured thing. Stars are just stars. They're all at different distances from us. And different cultures around the world see in the sky different things. If you've grown up in Australia, whoa, it looks just like a kangaroo, right? If you've grown up in the UK, oh, it looks just like a cow, right? Same stars. When you pitch your startup, it's like that. They're hearing a bunch of words and ideas from you, and you need help. You need to help them join the dots in a way that makes sense to them. If you talk to someone who's never seen a kangaroo about a kangaroo, they're not going to get it, right? So you have to express it in terms that make sense to them, and that's why all that listening to the ecosystem is so important. Now, there isn't time to go into this in great depth, but I'm almost finished with a PhD. I've got about 6 months left. And one of the themes that runs through the PhD is a bunch of gemology that I won't get into called the logics of critical explanation. But it's really interesting to me because it's something most startups don't think of. If you go to most startup advice sessions or whatever, they'll tell you how to put together a value proposition. They'll tell you about how to set your pricing strategy, blah, 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 blah. All good stuff, but it's only 1/3 of success. You need to understand the politics of what's going on around you. You need to understand who in my ecosystem am I going to be disrupting? Who in my ecosystem is going to be a huge advocate for me? Who's going to be on my side? Who do I have to convey, make a change with, yeah? You need to understand the politics of what you're going into. And you might think if you're launching a diagnostic product, is there, sorry to keep coming back to you because it's the only business I know about in this room. If I launch, what's your guys' business? What do you guys do? You're working together? What's your business? Say again?
Deep tech.
Deep tech. And in what area? What problem do you solve for who?
Semiconductor industry.
And which part of it? Okay, so here's the challenge. If you remember my story thing, you need to be able to say, we help semiconductor companies stay at the forefront of development by offering a new sub-nanometer process, blah, 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 right? What we actually deliver is an amazing membrane thing or a new solvent for lithography or whatever, right? But you need to be able to explain it to my mum, if she was still alive, so that she can tell her friend whose daughter works in the semiconductor industry that they should talk to me. So you wouldn't think that the semiconductor business is political, would you? But of course it is. If you look at the dispute between China and Taiwan, a load of it's to do with TSMC, right? Who controls all of the precision lithography for semiconductors in the world? It's the Dutch, right? You Dutch? Yes, I thought so. You looked Dutch. So it is lithography you're doing, right? So there is politics at the kind of international level about semiconductors. There's also obviously rivalry between individual firms in that industry. And there is rivalry between engineers. If you'll excuse my language, particularly male engineers, willy measure with each other all the time, right? Engineers always want to be the smartest guy in the room, always, right? I'm the one who knows. So there's a political dimension, even in something like a pure, very deep tech business. But there's also this fantasy thing. If you genuinely want people to care about your business, there has to be some greater hope. There has to be some greater fear. You need to invest in AI because if you don't, the whole world will be controlled by robots and they will eliminate human beings slowly and drain our blood. Right? And if you hear people like Geoffrey Hinton, just got the Nobel Prize for all that stuff, that's the way he talks about AI. And he's doing great, even though he's saying AI is going to destroy the world, he's the one who's promoting it, So fear, there's nothing wrong with fear. Fear is a very great motivator. Right? But hope and dreams, saving the world as well. So if you can find a reason why people should care, what's the human consequence of semiconductor, whatever it is you do in semiconductors, and we should have a conversation about that at some time, then we'll care about it. And what that means is, if you told my mum your story, she won't understand anything about the semiconductors and she won't remember that. But she will say, oh, there's these people and they're like saving kittens, right? And what is it? Oh, it's something to do with semiconductors. Oh, you should talk to Hugh. And that's the way you get the sales lead. Okay. So nothing I've told you is original. All of it is derivative. Watch this YouTube video. If you've never seen Simon Sinek, please watch him. It's a really good investment of 5 minutes in your life. How to tell a story, why, how, and what. And also, in terms of that fantasy element, please remember what the late, great Maya Angelou said. People don't care about what you say, they care about how you make them feel. Right? Make people feel with your communication, whether it's staff, whether it's customers, whether it's investors, you need to make them feel. That's what motivates action. And when you understand what pain and gain they're trying to achieve, and there's a whole philosophy called jobs to be done here. Google it. I won't go into it today, but jobs to be done is really interesting. Clayton Christensen is the guy to look up. Try and figure out what people are trying to achieve. That was related to your question, sir, your point. Figure out what gain and pain they're trying to gain and avoid. Figure out how you can give them the gain, figure out how you can take away the pain, and that's how you position your product or service in terms of what it does for other people, not in terms of the technology, not in terms of what you think the world looks like. How you see the world doesn't matter because you're not the customer. It's how the customer sees the world. Try and figure out your elevator pitch based on that. Thanks, Yvonne. Now, next month, we'll talk about marketing and we'll talk about the journey towards this magical thing called product market fit. All I'll say for today is that you will know when it's a bit like when you're a teenager and you ask your mum, how will I know when I'm truly in love, mum? Maybe you don't have that conversation with your mum. And she'll say, you'll know when you know. Yeah. Well, it's a bit like that with product market fit, right? There are three things that you will know if you've achieved product market fit. First of all, people actually want the product, right? It's something that you can make a profit delivering. Otherwise, it's a charity. And this is the most interesting thing, that people actually care about it, that they keep coming back. Now, in my life, I've sometimes been awarded, I was very lucky, I've been offered some prizes and things for work I've done. None of that matters to me, right? What matters to me is that people pay me money, not because I want the money particularly. I have a pretty cheap lifestyle, as you can see from my clothing, right? I have a fairly low maintenance wife, which is wonderful. She doesn't have any expensive habits. We live in an HDB. What I get off on is that people choose me, not other people. I get off on the fact that my customers come back to me, right? That's how I know I'm delivering value. We'll talk more about that next time. So if you've got to the end of this second stage of your business, when you've now got a product out there in the market, and I appreciate we're zooming over a whole load of stuff there. I say we will come back to it next time. This is a kind of a checklist of stuff that will emerge. You need all of these things. Some of them pretty obvious, name cards, a website, right? You may not have heard of a media kit before. Has anyone ever heard of a media kit? So a media kit is in one place, it's a short one paragraph description of your business, pretty much the elevator pitch. It's photographs that they can do to anyone can use to illustrate your product. It's copies of your logos and things like that. So imagine that you were a blogger and they got very interested in your semiconductor company and they're thinking, oh, I'd really like about these, I want to write about these guys, but how do I explain what it is they do? Because it's so complicated. So you need a magic graphic that they can download from your website that just says in one graphic what you do. And then everyone goes, oh, okay. They do that. We do contraceptives for goats. We do dating for trees, whatever it is, something, right? So the media kit will contain all of the assets that anyone needs to tell a story about you. Okay, thank you, Yvonne, yes. So now imagine you've got to the end of this and you have a scale up. I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly now and we move into Q&A. If you are at the magical end of this phase here, communication becomes something that's really quite professionalized at this point. This is the point in your business when you should be hiring a PR agency. You should either have internal communication specialists, you should have an internal investor relations specialist, or you should have companies that do it for you, right? This is the point at which you need to stop being a startup and you not start behaving like a scale up. If we move on to the next slide, Yvonne. So let me give you an example of how that happens. This company is called TradeGecko. We put the very first money into it. It was Carl and his friend Cameron. They came over from New Zealand. I had a startup accelerator on this floor in unit 22 over there back in 2012. We put, I think, $25,000 into this business. It sold for, I can't tell you exactly how much, but it was over $100 million a few years later. The story that TradeGecko told evolved over time. When they first set up, they thought they were going to be doing a sort of iPad-based sales tool so that you could walk into potential customers and show them stuff on the iPad, and then they could like click the stuff that they wanted for their shop, something like that. As they had that conversation with the market that I talked to you about at the beginning, they realized that no one cared about that. But what people did care about was that many, many organizations had warehouses full of stuff, electric guitars, drill bits for oil rigs, scalpels for surgeons, right? And they were trying to sell that stuff internationally. and they were disconnected from the market. There was a whole load of complex data that didn't fit together. And they realized that actually, if they could integrate that whole process of data flow around distributing products internationally, they could create a valuable business. So they did, and it's called TradeGecko, and they sold it to Intuit, which you might know is a small to medium-sized enterprise accounting software business, a publicly listed one. So the story about what TradeGecko is evolved over the time. And at the beginning, it was about scrappy guys in t-shirts and shorts. At the end, it was about MBAs wearing suits. That's the way it goes, sorry. It's like when you're young, you look at your dad and you think, oh my God, I don't want to be like my dad. And then you turn into one. Okay. As your story evolves, one of the things that's a bit puzzling to people at first is that a story for your company is like the sides on a box. I think this is something like a pizza box, isn't it? So there are different sides of this. This is the base of the pizza box. These are the sides that stop the pizza slipping out when the guy's crashing down the road with a bike on delivery. This is the lid where all the cheese gets stuck, right, as he's bouncing along. And this bit keeps it closed. So there are different sides of this box that all have a different function. And the same is true for the story of your business as it evolves. There will be different sides of it that you expose to different people, but they need to connect together into one thing. Let me show you what I mean. When you are a mature business, there will be roughly 4 groups of people that you need to talk to. Of course, there are customers. And as the gentleman in the white shirt was saying back there, customers want to know what the product benefits are. They want to know, they don't want to know what you sell. They want to know, why should I buy it, right? They want to know what benefits is it going to give me, what opportunities is going to open up. How can I tell my boss that there's 0 risk in adopting this thing and we're going to get benefits next month, right? They want to be excited by something new. The word new is one of the most powerful words in the English language. So customers and partners want to hear all those sorts of things. But as you grow, you're also going to need talented people. And they want to know, what are the job opportunities in this company? How am I going to go back to my spouse and say, hey, I should leave my job in boring Big Co and I should go and work for this scale-up company, even though they've only been running 3 years, right? Why should you do that, darling? Well, because, right? Obviously, you've got the money men and women, and they want to know, how am I going to make a profit? If I put $1 million into your business now, when are you going to give me $10 million back? How can you show me you're making progress? And how can you show me you're delivering on what you promised? And then there's that community of interest. People like regulators, journalists, academics, whatever. They're interested in what you're doing. And they want to know another set of things about your business. So your media kit needs in time to address all of those things. Thank you, Yvonne. So that's a checklist when you get to the end of the whole thing. By the way, everyone's welcome to this PowerPoint. Yvonne's got it as a PDF, so you can all have a copy. Let's move on to the next stage. That's the end. Over to you guys. I think we have about 10 minutes. The microphone is yours. Well, actually, this microphone is yours. Hello? Yeah. I've stunned you into silence. You want to go for a pee? Gentleman at the back. Thank you very much, Yvonne. Yeah. Anyone's welcome to go for a pee, by the way. Don't feel you have to wait for me. I'm not in the least offended if you want to walk out.
Thanks, man. That was really good. So the last slide actually resonated with me a lot, because when I talk to those 4 people, the story is always different. Yeah. Is it advisable to just have 4 different stories for different sets of materials, or should there just be one material that resonates with all of them?
So there needs to be an elevator pitch at the core of it, which resonates and which is true. So the core of my PhD, I'm studying Theranos, which was fantastically successful at raising $700 million, but fundamentally there were lies.
Yeah, interesting topic.
Great story, didn't deliver. So yes, you need a common story that's true and something that will attract everybody. The thing about an elevator pitch, or sometimes what's called a credentials deck, is it's not something that makes a sale, it gets you through the door. So most of the time when you guys are pitching to investors, you don't want to, I've only had in my life one occasion when someone has literally thrown me a check across the table And then about 3 hours later, he phoned me up. He said, actually, do you mind if I just talk to my wife before you cash that check? But he did throw me a check for $100,000 across the table. It was about the 6th floor of Block 71 over there. Most of the time that doesn't happen. So the story is what gets you through the door, and then they have to decide that they want you, and then they buy, or they give you money, or they join your company or whatever.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any questions for Hugh?
What I think would help these guys running this program is, as you reflect on today, there's a load of stuff I haven't covered. I haven't covered presentation skills. I haven't covered, as I say, how to put together a credentials deck or even what one is. We haven't talked about what goes in an investment pitch. There might be formal sessions that you have on all of those things, but there are no dumb questions in this program, okay? If there is something you want to know, please let the team know, or let your mentors know, so that we can make sure you have access to it, yeah? Because what I can guarantee is every single question that you have has been addressed before, and someone in our community knows the answer, right? They don't necessarily have a magic wand, they can't fix it for you straight away, but other people will have met that problem, right? There's very little unique. Stunned silence. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, thank you. So again, we need your feedback for this session as well. So please take a minute or two to help us with your feedbacks. Hugh and Eric is still around. So if you have any other pressing questions for them, feel free to catch them after this. We have a lunch together. Zena, everybody look at Zena. She's our new marketing colleagues in charge of marketing, social media. So she's looking for startups who can actually help to give her some comments. She will be filming you, post you, give you some publicity on our social media. So first come, first serve, right? Yeah. Mostly about like what the ways of the masterclass that you attended, how will you apply it to your startup or to your company right now, etc. And all these will go on to our LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And obviously, we kind of video in the caption will tag you and your mention the startup name also. So if you need some airtime on our platform, please reach out to her. Then we also have a few upcoming networking events for all of you. Tomorrow we'll be having our CNY get together over here as well from 6 to 9. Please join us. Wear your most festive clothing. Then on the 10th February, we are going to have a panel fireside chat with some AI specialists. Prof. Ben, our Vice President for NUS Enterprise Ecosystem, will be here. Tina, she's actually a participant of Gen AI program that was run last year. She will be here as well. Then we have two representatives from Microsoft. They are the CTO and the head of business development strategy. So go to marketing strategies. Yeah, you can actually hear straight from the horse's mouth. Please join us on the 10th. These are the link, the QR codes are there. Sign up if you are keen to attend. Otherwise, I think we are good for now. Join us on the lunch. We also have our US rep today here with us, Angeline. She's in charge of our Block71 US office. So if you need any advice on your US expansion plan, please reach out to her. She's just outside as well. Otherwise, please join us on our lunch. Thank you. Oh, sorry, we have one more. On the 11th of Feb. The founders okay. Yeah. Rajin, one of our startups, he's also a candidate of our Gen AI program last year. And Brian Chua, the ex-CTO of Microsoft, will be here as well. You can catch them for your technical advices if you need any. Yeah. So that's the QR code to sign up as well.